Jean, are you excused that? Good evening and welcome to the Monday, May 11th, today's May 11th, 12th, Monday, May 12th, 2025 annual budget public hearing meeting. At this time, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will have, the board is required to appoint a permanent chairperson who will conduct the annual budget hearing. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the appointment of Mayor Chad Clark as permanent chairperson for the 2025 annual budget hearing. Can I have a motion?
Motion,
Amy. Second? Catherine? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mayor Clark, we will turn the meeting over to you.
All right, first, I'd just like to start off with the rules of conduct for tonight's meeting. All remarks should be directed to the chair, who shall decide all questions of order. Remarks must be courteous in language and deportment. Please avoid all personalities and do not allude to others by name or motives. During the questioning period, which Superintendent Charlo will moderate later in the program, anyone who wishes to ask a question may do so at that time. Anyone who wishes to ask a question must state his name, his or her name, so the district clerk will be able to take accurate minutes of the proceeding.
Okay.
So I just want to formally welcome everyone. We are grateful that you are here to learn a little bit more about our 2025-2026 Marcellus Schools budget. Last week, all taxpayers in the district should have received the budget newsletter. This information can also be found on our district website. If you go under About, click Budget Information, the newsletter is available on the website as well. So tonight, Mr. Sinaccio, our school business official, who's with me tonight, and I will be providing you just an overview, an in-depth overview of the 25-26 school year budget and our process in the development of the budget. And so we do encourage you to ask questions, and if you think of something after you walk away, I do want to let you know, please reach out to us. We would rather be able to answer your questions so that there's no misconceptions or misunderstanding. So I encourage you, if after you leave tonight, there are questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. Our contact information will be available on the last slide at the end of the hearing. So before we actually launch into the specifics about the budget, I do want to just display this collage. And really, this is why we do what we do. And this is why our community is so strong, because our students and all the programming and the opportunities available to them, as you can see on this slide. And so these are some terms that you will learn a little bit more about tonight as Mr. Sinaccio and I go through the budget. We will try to give you an explanation of what these terms mean, but we will also try to give you the context of what they mean in relation to our budget. And so before I review the fast facts, what I do want to just sort of emphasize is a budget is exactly that. It is really an estimate. It's our best estimate of what our expenses are going to be and what revenues that we have coming in. And much like your household budgets, there are some variables that happen throughout the year. If you think about your own home, if your refrigerator breaks or your washing machine or drying machine, your budget has to be adjusted based on those. So with the size of our district, you might imagine Fluctuations in pricing such as gas or electricity have a pretty large impact on our budget and that fluctuation. So let's start with some of the fast facts that you see here on the slide. Our school budget for the 25-26 school year is $42,338,563. And you will notice the first bullet point, it is continuing to rely on our appropriated fund balance. So that was one of the terms on that first slide. The appropriated fund balance is about 1.5 million. And just to give you a context of, well, what does that really mean, appropriated fund balance? So that is really just a pool of dollars that are set aside for unforeseen expenses that happen throughout the district. And again, just like I mentioned with your own household budgets, it's really dollars that are set aside for us for expenses that we have no way to estimate. Just an example, we had our freezer here at the high school several weeks ago that broke down, and that was an additional expense that there's no way we could have forecasted that. But again, that appropriated fund balance helps us offset. So the next bullet that you'll see is our tax levy increase. So it is 3.46% is the increase. That's what you traditionally have heard, the term 2% tax cap. And so there is a misconception, well, why isn't it 2%? The 2% is really just a number that is factored into a multi-step formula. And so it's either the lesser of the consumer price index or 2%. And so in running that formula, the tax levy is a 3.46%. And because it meets that cap, all we need is a 50% simple majority to pass. Just to give you a sense, so the levy that we will ask our community is about $23 million, which is an increase from last year's budget of about $771,000. And again, just to give you a sense of the last bullet there are 3 propositions on the ballot. So you'll see the first proposition is our school budget. The next one is bus purchases. So every year we have a schedule of bus replacements. And so that's exactly what you'll see on that proposition. The one thing that I do want to just make very clear, the bus proposition that you will see when you go to vote for the budget this year is for diesel buses. It is not electric buses. I know there's been a lot of misconceptions out there. We have not moved forward with the electric bus movement at this point because we do feel that it is not realistic. And there's a lot more research that has to be done. So although it is still a mandate, I am hearing from my sources at the state that they're going to allow waivers for districts and potentially move that date. So again, just an emphasis that school bus purchase is for diesel buses. And then by law, a school district that has a library within their district boundaries, we are obligated to put on our ballot a proposition for the library levy. And we have a representative tonight from the library. And again, that's something that is typical that you see in our budget every year. And so one of the things, again, just thinking about our overall budget and the revenues, the majority of our revenue comes from 2 places. Those 2 places are foundation and expense-driven aid. It's about 39% of our budget, and 54% comes from our tax levy. And so, again, Tony will get into the more specifics later, but you can see that that is our reliance. It's on what we ask our community to contribute, as well as foundation aid. And something that most people may not know is the foundation aid that has been provided to Marcellus schools in the past 2-3 years has been stagnant. So they have left us at a 2%. And that is primarily because we are designated a held harmless school district. Our enrollment has declined. And also with that declining enrollment, the state actually does a formula that's based on wealth index ratio. So property values and income values. And so with the declining enrollment, Marcellus is actually looks wealthier than other districts across New York State, in which case they leveled our foundation aid at 2%. And so that's what we plan for, and that's what the final budget that the governor put forward allots for us. So knowing that we have had pretty stagnant foundation aid, the past couple of years, we have really made a concerted effort to look at our staffing and all of our needs. Again, ensuring that we are not negatively impacting our programming. So whenever there is a retirement and whenever there is a need for a staff member, we come together as an administrative team and closely examine one, is that person, do they need to be replaced? And we always ask the question, will this negatively impact programming? And so with our reliance on the strategic plan, every decision that we made about the budget really focused on our strategic plan and making sure we were allocating funds that aligned with that strategic plan. So you can see that this slide shows some additions, so some things that we needed to add to our budget. And then the next slide shows several things that we were able to reduce. And I want to emphasize the majority of our reductions were through attrition. So people that were either retiring or leaving the district. And so at this point, Tony is going to take over. And what I want to just sort of give you a sense of what Tony is going to do. He's going to sort of zoom out a little bit and give you a 30-foot view of the budget. But then he's also going to zoom in and give you some more granular details of the budget. And again, at the end, we encourage you to ask questions.
Thank you, Jean. So this year, this budget cycle was really quite challenging for us as a school district. As Jean had alluded to, our status is of being a held harmless district. What that sort of creates is a shortage on the revenue side of our budget. So, for example, Marcellus received a roughly 2% increase in foundation aid. That equates to about $186,000 for us. There's a neighboring district, conversely, who, although they have declining enrollment, they're actually becoming more impoverished in comparison to the rest of the state. And so the result is that they're not considered a held harmless district. And I'd like to give you a sense of what that means monetarily. So for, as I said, our increase in foundation aid was about 2%. Their increase was about 11%. So really is quite a substantial increase in foundation aid for that district in comparison to us. And so what that means is that if you were to compare us and this other district, they're likely adding programs this year. They're likely not having to reduce. And so we have to operate with the cards that we're dealt. And so as I said, even with this same pattern of declining enrollment between the two districts, because we are perceived as being wealthier in comparison to the rest of the state, if we were to go to our legislators, in fact, another district that's held harmless did go to their legislators, their local representatives, and that district was told by those representatives, well, because you're now perceived as wealthier, your taxpayers should be able to afford to pay more in taxes. So I don't necessarily believe that to be true for Marcellus, and I know that other district that approached our legislators. And so we're sort of at a crossroads with this foundation aid formula. So there's a lot to evolve on that front. But with all this being said, I'd just like to share with the community what a great job this Board of Education, Mrs. Charlotte, and the administration did preparing the budget for next year. It was really a difficult task in comparison to prior years. And so I'd just like to give them a kudos. So we could go back to that slide for just a moment. So I'll get into the details, as Gene said. We're actually going to start a little bit granular right now, and then we'll get up to that 30,000 foot view in a second. So we'd like to share the slide each year just to give folks a sense of what's driving our overall budget increase. So the increase in total this year is $629,333. So if you were to add the larger green bullets, if you were to add those numbers up, that's what they would total. Total is 629,000. So first we'd look at annual contractual and staff increases. The net increase overall is 202,000. If we go down below that, we see that our initial budget included an increase in salaries of $784,000. But after going through the previous two slides that Mr. Charlotte reviewed, after finalizing the reductions in staff, that total is 667,000. That's offset by some increases. We have one addition to our staff this year. It's offset almost exactly by the cost of the program that we're eliminating from BOCES. So at BOCES, we participated in the central business office. The cost of that service at BOCES equals the cost of the salaries and benefits for the person we now will employ in district. So just to review the net cost of staff salary increases, we have employee benefit cost increases of 71,000. An increase in debt service, that label there is not exactly correct. So there are actually two items contributing to that. First is the 2021 project, as it indicates there, of 131,000. And then there's other debt of about 126,000 for bus purchases. Normally it would be for only 1 year. The buses that were approved back in 2023, as we all know, things are not being manufactured as quickly as they once were. And so we're actually receiving both the 23 buses and the 24 buses at about the same time. It's just an unusual circumstance that combined for those two bus purchases, the annual debt services, as we see here, about 126,000. The last two items, slight increase in BOCES instructional programs of 6,000. And then at the very bottom, if you can see that as that's sort of the junk drawer, I guess, of our budget for supplies, equipment, and insurance, overall increase of about 92,000. We also like to share this information each year just to give folks a sense of where Marcellus is as far as the tax rate per thousand is concerned. So as you can see here, we are the fourth lowest. We have the fourth lowest tax rate in the area. I don't want to present this as necessarily, some amazing feat. There are lots of factors that come into play to determine what a district's tax rate per thousand might be. The largest contributor is going to be the commercial property that's located in our district. So more commercial property means higher property values overall, and that will drive down the tax rate on true. In addition to that would be the amount of taxes that the levy that the district needs to raise to support its budget. Now, let's say a district is very poor. They're likely going to drive some additional state aid, in some cases a significant amount. That will also affect the levy and drive the levy down, which ultimately will drive the tax rate down. So overall, I'm going to share with you my thoughts as after being here for 13 years, working here, living here for, if I can do the math, and I am good at numbers, for 29 years actually this year. I've lived here for 29 years. Marcellus has historically done a great job operating efficiently as possible. And in my opinion, they continue to do so. I would say that's the third largest contributor to driving that tax rate down, is how efficient is the school district. So I give us an A+, I would say, in that front. So this slide, we're required to present our budget in three parts: administrative, program, and capital. So administrative is just what it sounds like. That would be the district office, finances, That would be our building principals. So that's those folks and those operational components make up the administrative budget, which is 7.8% of our overall budget. That's a very good indicator of how efficient the district is administratively. We're on par with the lowest as a percentage of overall budget administratively in the region. So another district near us, similar size, is just under 11% this year. So what that translates to, if we were to have an 11% of our budget was or the administrative portion, that would translate into about spending $1.5 million more on administrative programs here. So, as I say, that's just a great indicator of how efficient we are administratively. Program is what we really care about here, is serving our students. So that's our instructional programs, our support services like psychologists, guidance, social workers, our transportation program, and our special education program. And then last is capital. So that's a big number, and there's a large dollar amount that's part of our overall capital budget. Those are the loans that we've taken out to pay for maintenance of our facilities. So about half of our capital budget, a little more than half actually, is strictly that. It's our debt service for maintaining our buildings. The rest would be utilities, electric, natural gas, garbage, things of that nature. So we can see the totals here. So next slide. All right, so we've talked about expenditures. Now we're going to talk a little bit about revenues, state aid. As you can see, our total state aid is increasing by about $238,000. So I mentioned earlier, $186,000 in foundation aid. There's a little bit more, about $50,000 or so. That would be driven from our expense-driven aids like transportation aid, building aid. Building aid is not changing much because we've already realized the revenue for an increase in revenue for building aid from our recent capital projects. That's really not changing much next year. And BOCES aid. So large chunk of that increase, foundation aid, the rest is expense-driven aids. Property taxes, as Mrs. Charlo indicated, increasing about $771,000. And last but not least are other sources. You can see here federally, admissions, interest, tuition, BOCES, and fund balance. So Mr. Charlo referenced a number earlier of about $1.5 million. That's the last item in that text there, application of fund balance. So you can see $1.5 million of appropriated fund balance, another 1.2 in interest income and other miscellaneous revenues. Gives us the total at the bottom of $42,338,000. Everyone wants to know each year, how are my taxes going to be affected? So I'm going to walk you through the numbers, and then Sherry did a real caveat on this slide. Up at the very top, you can see estimated tax on true for 24-25. So that number was shared at this time last year. That was the projected tax rate per thousand at this time last year of $18.51. The actual tax on true for 24-25 became $16.78. So how is that possible? How could you be so far off, and what could happen? Well, who here owns a home? Anyone own homes? What's happening to the value of your home? Going down or going up? Going up. So as the value of homes increases, that will drive down this tax rate per thousand. Okay, it's really that simple. And then we also know that in Marcellus, we have some new developments going in. In fact, I have not in the last few weeks driven up Seneca Turnpike, but most recent trip up the Seneca Turnpike on the right-hand side of the road, just before the golf course, I see that there are buildings. That's not within the village, is that? So I see some development going on. So anytime there's development happening in a community, that's also going to drive that tax rate per thousand down. So that's why. So the 1736 that we're estimating for next year, I know that's not going to be the number at this time next year. Would we guess that that's going to be lower or higher? Anybody want to guess? Lower, yes. So somebody in the back is help me out here. So it will likely be lower, and I would suppose it's going to be much lower. So we have to share this information because people want to know. I don't personally like to because it's never accurate. Fortunately, today, the outcome is usually better than I would project, so it's, I suppose, positive news, but so nevertheless, we share it. So down at the second row, where we say the average tax bill with the star exemption, the likely increase is about $40. That's based on a home that says that with a fair market value of $100,000. We know that's not realistic. That we're just doing it simply so that folks can do the math. So if you have a home with a fair market value of $300,000, you could assume your tax increase next year should be roughly $120. As I say, I don't like to share this information because it's never accurate. I would, if I were a betting man, I would guess it would be less than that, but you'll have to look at your own tax bill to see how that's evolved over time. And last but not least, we show the tax rate. So what we need to show here is on the right-hand side, this tax rate on true. It's really important that we understand, for those of us who live in, for example, the town of Onondaga, the tax rate projected for next year is $26.70. But we apply this equalization rate to that value to get our tax rate on true, which is $17.36. It's no coincidence that they're all exactly that amount because that's the math that's used to determine those values for each town. There is the caveat at the very bottom. These will change. This is not what it will be a year from now. I promise you that. In all likelihood, assessments will rise up. We'll have some new houses coming on the tax rolls. It'll likely drive that tax rate at lower. The contingency budget. What would happen if the voters were to not approve our budget next week? Well, it means that we jump into action and figure out a new plan. What would we have to do at a bare minimum if we were to not go out to the voters, because we could go out for a second vote. But if we were to not do that, minimally, we have to remove under a contingency budget scenario, non-essential equipment, and any salary increases for staff that are not in a collective bargaining unit. So those two values for equipment, non-essential equipment, are $87,500, and the non-contingent salary increases are about $28,000. So that's the minimum impact. But also under contingency budget, we cannot increase our tax levy beyond what our levy was this year. And so that would mean that we may need to further reduce the budget by $655,000. I'm not saying that's what would happen, because there are other strategies that we might apply to mitigate that without further reducing the budget. So in any case, as I say, if the voters were to not approve the budget, then of course the board would have to jump into action to figure out another avenue. Not going to spend a lot of time here. I really want to draw your attention to two columns, 2019-20 and 2024-25. So as we can see, over the last 6 years, year one, 2019-20, our total reserves were 5.4 million. Projected at the end of this year is 5.9 million. So that is a, I would argue, I guess, as a matter of fact, is a very minimal increase in the level of reserves that the district is maintaining. So it's about an 8% increase over a 6-year period. What that tells me, and it should hopefully tell others, is that Marcellus's budget is super efficient, and so generally whatever we receive in reserves is likely what we expend on the expense side of the budget. We're not generating a surplus. The reason for that, go back to our conversation about being a health harmless district. Our revenues are really struggling to keep up with our expenses. And so we have to operate as efficiently as possible. That's a very strong indicator that that's what's happening. I should mention in the middle years, that's our COVID time, right? That's when we had additional dollars coming to us from the federal government. So we all know, what it was like during COVID and the years after. And so if we go back to 2020, there was an intentional plan at that time to construct an agriculture facility. So we all know that that facility has now come to fruition. And we were able to pay cash for that building. We didn't have to go and borrow money. And so indirectly, these COVID dollars paid for the construction of that facility. What's sort of neat about that is that we were able to pay cash, but then get money back from the state in the form of building aid. So we were sort of, I would say, a double investment on use of COVID funds to construct that facility and then to get money back from the state at the same time. It was a really nice approach that we put into place. The other propositions, as Mrs. Charlotte mentioned, were the purchase of buses, not electric, but diesel buses. We're not anywhere close to ready to even consider electric buses. That would result in, of course, the disposal of 4 of our buses. And then, as Mrs. Charlotte mentioned, anytime the local library is looking to increase its levy, we're obligated to put that proposition on our ballot. Final details, budget vote, Tuesday, May 20th from noon to 9 p.m. We do have 3 vacant seats, and thank you, 3 candidates that are running for a seat on the Board of Education. So, thank you. Qualifications to be a voter. And thank you. Thank you so much for bearing with me as I delved into the details. There are a lot there. Does anybody have any questions?
Question, Tony. What do you think the likelihood of us continuing to be saddled with that held harmless status as we're moving forward?
I would not dare to guess. I have no idea. They are looking at the Foundation Aid formula on a as a statewide basis, I guess. And I'm not sure what's going to come of that. My fingers are crossed that they will recognize, in my opinion, the inequity on distribution of aid currently.
Yeah.
But
it's hard to predict.
Would you happen to off the top of your other parameters for number of children in the district, like where we stand? Or possibly?
Yeah, I have some sense. So to get off the held harmless district or held harmless status, without bringing other variables into play, we need about 400 more children. So yeah, so we are able to very lengthy formula, and I did take the time to create it to answer that very question. And yes, we need families like the Sinaccios to move out so that my children are growing gone, so that younger folks can come in and send children. It's one of the wonderful features of our district is that people like to stay here, right? So kids are raised and move out, and mom and dad stay here because they love it so much. It's that's the truth. It's a reality, I think. So I think that's really what's creating a pretty drastic decline in enrollment.
Other questions?
John Dorio. Hi there. First of all, I thank you all for doing this job, because I would never sign up to do your job. So thank you. I am a little confused on this reserves. And in general, the change in terminology, like that first page you showed with all the terminology, none of those are in the sheet that we got sent. So it's kind of catching me off guard that I'm being introduced new terms. It's very important that you use the same terms to mean the same thing in every publication and every meeting.
Sure.
So first of all, I was concerned because you're talking about reserves and then this approved fund balance, which match the same number. But it sounds like they're two different things. So could you clarify what reserve, that one page had a lot of it, but then it said it went from 8.6 million last year down to 5.9. But according to this budget, we only spent 1.9.
Sure.
So it's just confusing. So first of all, yeah, it's great, over 6 years, we're up 500,000, but we're down 2.7 since last year.
Yeah.
Can you explain that change? Sorry, I've got 12 questions.
Yeah, that's okay, that's right. So, so you're right, there are lots of terms thrown around, and so when I'm gonna share with you how I would phrase reserves, for example. So let's start with the very last line there, appropriated fund balance. I myself would not refer to that as a reserve. I would refer to everything above that as some form of reserve.
Right, this reserve isn't normally in your budget.
Correct. It's not normally in our budget, and we have not designated any intended use for those reserves. And so unemployment insurance reserve, for example, in all candor, that's the same number that appeared here as when I started 13 years ago. So that fell into that reserve at some time prior to me, and it will sit there until we elect to use it. Honestly, I don't, there's no other way to explain that. So a very, very small number. Capital reserve, on the other hand, to your question about where did that 2.7 million go, that's where it went. So if we were to go back to, I believe it was 2023, May of 23 vote, we asked the community to entertain a transfer of funds from, I believe the term we used was unassigned fund balance, to our capital reserve for the purpose of constructing our agricultural facilities.
So that capital reserve in my term is also appropriated. It's assigned to something. It's not. For me, I always consider reserve as a emergency fund that they talk about at home.
Yep.
But that emergency fund had 2.5 million in it, but it wasn't for an emergency. It was pre.
So this was an interesting one that, that for me anyway. So the proposition that was put forth to the voters did something that we would normally take 2 votes to do, but it was wrapped into one proposition. We had to have a conversation with our bond counsel about this and whether this was appropriate. They determined that, of course, it was very appropriate. So not only did we, in this proposition, we established a reserve, we funded the reserve, and authorized the expenditure of funds from the reserve, all in one proposition. So that's a pretty unique proposition for the voters to entertain. But what I also liked about it is that it's incredibly transparent. So all within one proposition, very clear what it is that we're looking for. And you're right, it's really strange that we're gonna fund a reserve, but then plan to use it. So that's why I say it was a very unique circumstance. But I would say arguably that the COVID in general was a very unique circumstance, and I would still say a really smart approach that the superintendent at that time, and in conjunction with a bunch of conversation, really worked out well. The retirement contribution reserve, another one, you see the same number all the way across. That's actually in my opinion, a good thing. We've allocated, if you were to go back to when that reserve was created, the intent was to fund the reserve to mitigate fluctuations in our retirement contribution rate, which is about 10% of our instructional salaries. That's what we currently pay into the retirement system. If we were to go back to 2009, 10, we know what happened at the collapse of our housing market, which wreaked havoc on a lot of things, including the retirement contribution rate. Those rates jumped up to roughly 17%. in our case, for Marcellus, today, that would equate to about a $1.1 million jump in one single line item in our entire budget. And so to mitigate the potential, to attempt to mitigate the potential to, for that to happen to us again, this reserve is established so that if there was a large swing in those rates, that we would have a reserve to turn to. So I'm glad that it still sits there because, I used to use this phrase, I'm going back now to the late 90s, that what goes down must come up. So that's speaking specifically about these contribution rates. If they go down, we can count on them someday going down. So I think we're in a position to address that if and when that happens. There's a small reserve here, it's referred to as an EBLAR reserve. That money is very, very limited in what we can use that for. Technically, we can only use it to pay for compensated absences or unused sick or personal vacation time at the person departs. So we have not had a need to draw from that reserve. And the last but not least is the unappropriated fund balance. And you see there in parentheses, up to 4% of the budget. You can see in the 2 years there, in 21, 22, and 22, 23, every school district in New York State was just like that. The reserve was overfunded because money was raining down upon us from the federal government. And lots of stories to tell about those times where we're having to determine within about 3 weeks how we're going to spend, in our case, about $1.4 million. That's the pressure that was put on school districts from eventually the federal government to spend that money. It's really insane in my opinion. So every district in New York State looks just like that. We're back down now to below that 4% threshold. So what that means, next year's proposed budget is about 42 million. So the max we can have in our unassigned fund balance or unappropriated fund balance is $1,680,000. So that $1,680,000 is the cap. That's the most we should be carrying. We're at about 1.4. So a lot of information there about reserves, but your point well taken about being consistent with phrasing.
Yeah, no, that was helpful, but I think I'm still confused. So I can't, not me, but you guys can't just pick from that 2.7 million retirement next year because you want to keep our tax rate below 3 point whatever.
We could, if we were to.
So that's what I mean. To me, an emergency fund isn't linked to anything. And here you've got it linked to 5 different things. Then you have one called unappropriated. But so I guess here's another way to ask: where did the 1.5 of appropriated for this year come from?
So if we were to go back in time, we established an appropriated fund balance. So sometime, at some point in time, some time ago, the dollars available, let's say likely in unappropriated or unassigned, was used to apply towards the following year's budget. Okay, so in this case, let's pick on 2021, 2022. So at the end of that year, we had $3 million in unappropriated fund balance. We could have carved a chunk of that out and applied it towards the following year's budget to reduce the tax levy. That's generally not, or I can tell you that's not a good approach if we actually intend to use those dollars to fund the budget for planned expenses, right? So in that case, if we were to have carved out a chunk of that money to reduce the following year's tax rate and use those funds to pay for recurring expenses, we've created a structural deficit in our budget that would be a problem for the district in perpetuity. If we were to permanently reduce the tax levy with temporary funds, that's a bad approach. So what did they do at some point, some time ago? They carved out, in this case, $1.5 million and applied it as a revenue to fund unforeseen expenses, which is what Mr. Charles referred to earlier. And so that's a scenario where, you know, as she said, we had a cooler that went down, and let's say that repairs $50,000. It's a one-time expense that we can bite out of that $1.5 million and not create a structural deficit, because hopefully that same cooler is going to break the day. So that's how appropriated fund balance is used in our budget and most school budgets. It's just to fund unforeseen expenses. So that's why that's sitting there. That's why you see the amount remaining relatively stable. Back in 2022-23, we had a challenging budget year that year. We decided that we could safely assign additional dollars as in the form of appropriated fund balance, but manage the budget going forward, which we're able to do successfully. So we didn't have to bite into those dollars. We've got to pull back now, because even this year, it's likely that we're going to end this year with some form of a deficit. We're gonna spend more than we bring in revenues, absent this appropriated fund balance. So what that means is that there's a structural deficit in our budget that we're going to have to mitigate. So that's what we pulled back on use of appropriate fund balance for next year. I'm giving you a lot of information that, you know, that evolves over time for amount of time as possible. So this is something that, you know, if you'd like to go through our budget in detail and how it's constructed, I'd be happy to do that. That's, you know, so yeah, I'd be happy to sit down. Yeah, it's really interesting. School budgets are, you know, they're quite complex.
Any other questions? So here is the contact information for both Tony and myself. Feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to sit down with you if you want further explanation on anything, or even if you walk away and you have further questions or want clarification, we're happy to sit down with anybody and talk through any questions that you have.
Do we need to do that? Do we need to go back and look on it? Okay. I think at this time we should go back and read the minutes from, so I'll turn it over to Colleen and then we'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Clark. If that's okay with you.
These are the minutes of last year's budget hearing meeting of May 13th, 2024. Referring to the minutes of last year's meeting, after the welcome and pledge of allegiance, Mayor Chad Clark was appointed as the permanent chairperson who was to conduct the annual budget hearing and election. There was a motion made by Catherine Branson Dennis and seconded by Kelly Rossiter that the board appoint Mayor Clark as the permanent chairperson. The minutes of the previous year's meeting of May 8th, 2023 were read. Mayor Clark reviewed the rules of conduct for the meeting. There was an introduction of board administrators and board candidates by Mayor Clark. Superintendent Jean Charlo and Business Administrator Anthony Sinaccio reviewed the budget details and propositions. The floor was open to the community for questions, of which there was one that was addressed by Mr. Sinaccio. The meeting was adjourned by Mayor Clark at 6:54 p.m.
Now we'll move on to turn it back over to you for item 6.
So at this point, I'd like to introduce the entire Board of Education. We have Christine Shea, who is the president, Sean Eddy, who is the vice president, Amy Bartolota, Catherine Branson Dennis, Josh Matusik, Erica Aquatic, and Justin Pritchard. Our administration, Jean Charles, our superintendent, Anthony Sinaccio, their business administrator, Robert Montgomery is assistant superintendent for curriculum, instruction, assessment, and data. The principals, Brian Seavey, Mike McCullough, Kathleen Mahoney, and Lauren Massa. Our directors, Michael Freed, Eric Hubbard, Carol Lux, Samuel Ray, Amy Mitchell, Brian Riefler, and Jacqueline Pierce. And tonight, we met our two board candidates, Josh Mazuzik, Erica Bukwatic, and Jennifer Tedesco.
All right, and we have covered the presentation and the questions, so at this time, we will adjourn this portion of the meeting. Can resolve that the annual budget public hearing be adjourned. Can I have a motion?
Motion, Sean.
Sean, second Catherine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. So at this time, we will move on to our regular Board of Education meeting, Monday, May 12th, 2025. And we will move to recognition.
Yes, so I do want to just give a huge shout out to the music department. So we were notified today that we have been identified again this year as one of the best communities for music education. And I'm sure it's not a surprise to you, but I think our music department was waiting, they hadn't heard. So we did officially get the notice today, and there was just a cheer of excitement. So kudos to our music department. They are incredible. I do want to just give a shout out. We had a district jazz concert on Friday night. And this is a picture, although it's probably a little tricky to see, but this is the DMS group, and we had parents, we had a grandparent who came, and we also had staff members who participated alongside with our students to perform one of the jazz numbers. So it was absolutely extraordinary. And then I thank you to former Mayor Curtin. He came last week to DMS, the DMS library, as you can see here, and provided a just an overview, a historical overview of Marcellus schools. And you can see just looking that it was well attended, and it was just a great event. And he's actually going to come back and do the same presentation for some of our students. So thank you again to former Mayor Curtin for being on hand to deliver that. And then a huge thank you to our KCH PTO, our DMS PTA, Jen Tedesco, and all the high school moms for showing our teachers such appreciation last week. So Teacher Appreciation Week was last week, and this was sort of the culminating lunch on Friday. And it was just amazing. And I think, I know our staff felt the love from the community. So a big thank you to all of them who pulled off just a wonderful week and a wonderful lunch on Friday. And that is it for recognition.
Okay, so at this time, we will move on to presentations.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a little jump. And you can see we have some guests here, some very important guests. These are our students from KCH Battle of the Books team. So I'm going to ask you guys to come on up. Right over here. They're going to do a little presentation about their experience with Battle of the Books.
All right, so I thought, besides me standing up here talking about how amazing our students are, I'm putting them on the spot here, and they've been practicing because they want to talk to you a little bit about what Battle of the Books is and what they did, and so I'm going to turn it over to them and let them explain.
Good evening, Superintendent Charlotte and members of the Marcellus Board of Education. My name is Ellen Thompson, and with me are Emma Shannon, Emma Uber, and Harrison Miller. We are proud members of the KCH Battle of the Books team. Our team name was the Book Explorers.
This competition asks students to read a set of 8 carefully chosen books, number the detail, and then answer fast-paced game show style questions about the titles and authors. The battle started with many teams competing in their own districts, and that many teams resulted in the competition.
This is a big time commitment. We started meeting weekly in November and went to the middle of April. This season, we first placed 14 teams from both KCH and DMS and won the Marcellus local battle. Next, we completed the Cortland Madison Onondaga regional battle. where we faced 15 teams, including first place grades 3 and 4. On April 9th, we represented Marcellus at the Central New York Battle of, or Super Regional Battle of the Books, and brought home, or where we faced 6 teams and brought home the 3rd to 4th grade championship title for KCA. We'd like to thank Ms. Middleton and Mrs. Ramsden, our teachers, our families, and all of you on the board for supporting our reading adventures. We promise to keep reading, keep learning, and keep making Marcellus proud.
And they put Marcellus on the map, and so we have a certificate of recognition for them that Mrs. Charlotte is going to hand out to them. So first up, we have Emmett Booth there. We've been practicing shaking. Next up, we have Harrison Maloney. Emma Shannon. Ellie Thompson.
Thank you. And before you go, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting, but make sure you grab some cookies and water back there. Congratulations. We are so proud of all of your work, and we've been following you all the way along. So way to go. So I am gonna also just give you sort of a rundown of the DMS auditorium project. So completed this past week, removed spotlights. So Ryan Riefler and his team and Adam Greiner, as you can imagine, helped just prep the area. So they removed spotlights, the sound and light board equipment, the Tormentor lights and projector so that they could safely storage those during the construction. The seating contractor removed and disposed of the seats. They have been mobilizing the gear, just ready for the sound and light booth, and started prepping the floor. And so this coming week, they're gonna finish the mobilization. They're gonna make sure that they protect the piano and the stage floor, remove the copper base and the carpet, and then start the demo of the concrete for the light and sound booth pad. So I'm just gonna sort of skip through some of these pictures, but you can see they've already done a lot in a short amount of time. Are they keeping those light fixtures, those bubble lights that have been there forever? Yes, those fixtures are remaining. Oh, they're staying. Yeah, most of this is the seat replacement, painting. There's a little wall on when you walk in to the right that has had some water damage, so they're trying to get to the bottom of that and fixing that as well. And then obviously new carpeting. Ryan, I don't know if you have anything to add. This is the new light and sound. They're actually laying out where the new light and sound board will be.
So instead of the makeshift light and sound board that Adam and I put in a few years ago, there'll be a full-scale model soundboard that will match the architecture of the room, allow for the spots to come down to floor level instead of being up in the balcony area. There will also be additional ADA compliant seating throughout the space. And the curtains on the stage are also being replaced for this project.
And just to give a shout out, Jack McCullough, who graduated several years ago, this was a project that was near and dear to his heart, that he, recognized that this is such a grand space and location, but it was deteriorating. And so just thank you to him for, working with Ryan at the time when he was here as a student, just to, again, sort of show the importance and talk about student voice. That's exactly why we're going to have a student board member. The things that are important to the students we need to listen to. So thank you to Jack. And thank you, Ryan, for keeping Jack up to date on the progress. And so the next presentation we have students here from the Green Gateway. You probably remember a few weeks ago, Ryan McMahon was here to award a grant. And it really is for our students for the work that they've been doing along the Green Gateway. So I am going to turn it over to Tyler Cooper, who oversees our independent study projects, and the students who are here to present.
So the good thing, we had a little bit of a buffer in between the readers, the explorers, and these guys, because they definitely had some cuteness back. So we've got some pretty amazing things happening with these guys as well. I'm just going to kind of introduce, and then I'm going to be the point person to kind of lead them into some of their slides. So we actually have Austin Raich coming back as an alumni, because as you'll see, some of these projects are ones that have taken years to accomplish. And many of the propositions that are now being funded were ones that had started last year with last year's independent study crew. Ryan Welch is actually another one who is still currently a student, but his junior year was part of the project for some of the housing, so he's going to talk a little bit more about that. And I'm going to skip over Max for a second and jump right to Abby Finn, who again this was a last year endeavor for her, but now to see it come to fruition, she's fortunate enough to be a senior this year and see before she leaves for the next chapter some of the hard-earned work really being put to good use. And then I'll jump to Max Camp. He and Elizabeth Mellon are now taking kind of the helm of the project management of some of the site projects that are going on now. And he's going to take the lead in explaining some of those. And so as you can see from the picture, we've gone from a dilapidated building that was really at a breaking point, literally and figuratively, in terms of, are we going to invest in this building and continue pouring money into it, or do we have a new vision? And so the village, with the help of John Curtin and now being taken over by Chad Clark as the mayor, started thinking about some ways where we can really beautify the environment and give some ownership to the students to take an important role in that. So you can go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Austin to kind of talk about some of the original design, and then Max Camp was actually one to kind of enhance it, and he'll talk about where we've gone from it in a later slide.
Yeah, so hello everyone, I'm Austin. I'm a graduate of 2024, and I started this project in September 2023 and worked on it throughout my senior year to June 2024. I started this project because I had just finished my second semester of junior year working on the bridge project down there. I'm sure you guys have seen the bridge, and that was a fun thing to do. So I wanted to stay involved in the Green Gateway project, so I proposed that I help work on the pavilion. My role in the pavilion during that year was design the initial plans. These plans are not my plans, they were modified by Max Camp, but design the initial plans, and then me, Mr. Clark, who I think Ryan and Abby were part of this too, we presented this to different state senators, county legislators, to get the funding to get these projects off the ground. The purpose of the pavilion is to add a covered shelter to the Green Gateway. We think that with covered shelter, it will add more traffic to the gateway. It'll add another thing with the pavilion, it will be available to rent, so add more revenue. And obviously it's nice to have a place to eat in the Green Gateway and with picnic tables and things like that. So yeah, and it's 20 feet by 40 feet in size for large group gatherings.
I'm Abby Finn, and this was a project that I did during my junior year, was a water retention system in the Green Gateway. And as Coop said, the Green Gateway used to be an old industrial mill site. So a lot of the ground is very compact due to like the structure being there and not being a natural environment for a while. So we're trying to bring back the natural beauty of the area. And with this includes a water retention system to reduce the amount of water runoff from any rain or anything like that into 9 Mile Creek, and being able to enrich the soil again and have nice soil in the Green Gateway for the future, and being more environmentally sustainable as a natural green park. So yeah, that was my project. And additionally, we wanted to add natural pollinator plants to bring back some color and life into the Green Gateway, to just make it a better space for everybody to come and visit. And yeah, attend.
Hi, Max Camp. So this is gonna go in right by, on the water, obviously. This is the project that Liz Mellon, who is not here, was working on. They wanted to build some sort of platform or ramp that people could fish off of to, obviously to bring in more visitors. And they had the DEC involved with this. They went down in the river and moved around a bunch of rocks, dug up some soil to make it a lot nicer of a fishing spot. So this right here was the first design that was made. It was created last year by another student, Nia Welsh. But then this year, someone, I believe someone at the village found this picture here, which is somewhere out west. And this is a fully ADA compliant ramp that the main benefit of this one being you're right down on the water level instead of here where you could be 5 feet off the water.
So this was a project done by my fellow classmate Jack Payne. I'm not really too familiar with what he was doing, but I was with him through a lot of the presentation process. So one of the main goals of the Connect the Greenways was to connect the Green Gateway to the town of Marcellus Park. The long-term plan of was connecting the Green Gateway to Otisco Lake, so that's a big pathway. And additionally connecting to Camillus and Erie Canal Trail. Drastically increasing, another goal is to drastically increase the ecotourism within Marcellus and surrounding areas. So like all these projects, and then it is going to be accessible to all.
Hello, my name is Ryan Welch, and for the past 2 years, I've been working on creating a development site for senior housing. And as Mr. Sinatra was saying, we need 400 more students to be able to come here and make the school district bigger. I had the idea of kind of starting to create senior housing that's kind of right in the middle of the village. And my main idea was that I wanted kind of the older individuals to sell their houses in the village and have these younger families and with kids and everything move in here, which can increase the population of the village and of the school districts. So I worked with 2 companies, actually. I worked with Third, and I worked with a company called 2+4. And this was the basic design outline that we created. And the Green Gateway Trail is actually going to come down through here. So it's going to be accessible for the older individuals to be able to walk down by the creek and go down by the park. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what this is going to create and see if this is going to increase population of Marcellus and students coming and enrolling.
So this is, as Austin was saying, he began the designs for the pavilion. When you saw on his slide, that was my initial first draft. It was pretty bad, done pretty quick. So I updated that a few months later, and then I sent it off to, I was working with the guys over at TDK Engineering in Camillus, and they took my draft and kind of made it a little more colorful, added some more detail. And this is based off of the old, there used to be a railroad station in this location a long time ago. So it's modeled to mimic how that used to look. Oh, so this was a couple weeks ago on Earth Day. Ryan McMahon came down. We all met at the Green Gateway. Throughout the year, we've been working to try and get this grant. So we got 2 grants, one from the county and one from Senator May. So we all met at the park, and got that grant.
So if you didn't realize it, this work and Tyler, just a huge credit to him with the work that he's doing with our students. They're putting us on the map, honestly, and the feedback that I get from legislators in Albany is just how impressed they are with. You keep hearing that nowadays companies are looking for soft skills, looking for students that can engage and make eye contact and shake hands. And so there is no doubt that the work that they're doing here will contribute to all of their success down the road. And the one thing that is particularly meaningful to me that I love that Tyler is doing, and all of you as well, is they're passing the baton. So these projects are getting started in high school, and many of these students are moving on, but Tyler and some of you even are helping choose the next class, the next generation to pass these projects off to, because they're not done overnight, they're multi-year projects. And so that to me is so meaningful, in that they're contributing their talents here in Marcellus. So thank you to all of you. Tyler, I can't even thank you enough for just spearheading all of this work and just relentless pursuit of making sure that our students are poised for these type of encounters and opportunities. This does not happen in other districts around this area. So thank you, you guys. You should be so proud of yourselves. We are proud of you. Cookies and water before you leave. Your coffee.
All right, at this time, we will move on to item 4, residents' comments. Public expression at the Board of Education meetings is encouraged, and a specific portion of the agenda shall provide for this privilege. In most instances, the board shall reserve judgment regarding questions and concerns that are brought to the board's attention at a board meeting. It is typically not prudent for the board to make instantaneous determinations. In addition, many issues that are brought to the board's attention do not require a formal determination by the board, but instead are most appropriately addressed by the superintendent of schools or persons designated by the superintendent without further board action in accordance with Board Policy 3220, Community Relations. We have any residents' comments at this time? With that, we will move on to the business portion of our meeting. Item 5.1, second and final reading of board policy. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the second and final reading of the following board policy. Policy 7240, student records, access and challenge. Policy 7241, student directory information. Policy 7243, military recruiters' access to secondary school students and information on admin content. I have a motion.
Motion.
Sean, and then I think I heard Erica. Okay. Questions or comments before we vote about any of those board policies?
So just a reminder, these are incredibly antiquated. Our last update on these was 2015, and these are bringing them up to current regulations with Law 2D and privacy information.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item 5.2, approval of Board of Education meeting dates for 2025 and 2026 school year. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the Board of Education meeting dates for the 2025-2026 school year. Can I have a motion?
Motion, Amy.
Amy? Second? Okay. Put Josh down. Okay. Any questions or comments before we vote? You know, we talked about maybe we had a couple meetings where we thought we would only need one for that
Yes, I
particular
mean,
month.
there are times where our board meetings are relatively short, so we sort of condensed here a little bit, and you'll notice it's very important as the spring, February, and March and April, that we do revisit the budget and the development of that budget. So you'll notice I added a couple budget workshops.
Yes.
So, the board will come together to review the current status of the budget next year at those times. And again, if we need to have a meeting, we certainly can have a special board meeting at any point.
All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item 5.3, amendment to the 2024-2025 school year calendar. Resolved that the Board of Education approves an amendment to the 2024-25 school year calendar as follows. June 26, 2025 will be a non-school day. June 25th, 2025 will be the last day of school, full day for UPK through 6th grade. June 25, 2025 will be the last day of school, half day for grades 7 through 8. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Erica,
Second.
second Sean. Questions or comments?
So every year when I build the calendar, I do it very conservatively so that we ensure, if we had a week where there was a blizzard and we have, a whole week off, 5-6 days, I build in that buffer. So typically, as we get closer to the end of the year, we have modified to half days. We still have a day, an emergency closing day remaining. And so we're going to build in that buffer for teachers to end their year, clean their rooms, grades. It's a lot at the end. And so Thursday, it was initially Thursday would be the last day of school. It will now be Wednesday, the 25th for UPK 6. That'll be a full day. I did shift to a half day for 7th and 8th, primarily because they actually have a little bit more wiggle room than UPK 6 because if you recall, UPK 6 has parent-teacher conferences, typically on November 1st. So students, UPK 6 aren't in school, so that's where the buffer is for 7-8. They have a little bit more of a buffer than UPK 6. So in the end, we're going to make 7th and 8th grade a half day. Everything else will remain the same. We have our moving up ceremony for 8th grade on Thursday, the 26th in the evening. That will remain the same. And again, if the board approves, I will make sure that I make notice to families about the alteration in the calendar.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, moving on to personnel. Approval of personnel items. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the following personnel items. You can see them listed before you. Items 6.1 through 6.9. Can I have a motion? Catherine? Second Sean. Questions or comments about any of those items before we vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to item number 7, consent agenda. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the following consent agenda items. You can see them listed before you, items 7.1 through 7.6. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Amy? Second, Catherine? Questions or comments before we vote?
So the cross-country trip, we'll see it's not until October, but it's helpful that they get that approval now so that they can start planning for travel and expenses, book the hotels. It allows them to book at a lower rate by booking now. So just, that's why you see it before you today.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Right, item number 8, informational items.
I don't have any informational
Okay.
items really. It was just the change in calendar, and I'll make sure that I get that communication out to families tomorrow.
Okay, all right, very good. And we'll have our ribbon cutting
Yep.
soon.
On May 31st, we have our ribbon cutting, and so we're continually promoting that on social media. We have invited various, local, I would say celebrities. Julie Abbott, she's coming. So we have a great turnout so far, and we're hoping we get more.
Great, awesome. All right, at this time, we will enter executive session. Resolve that the meeting in public be adjourned and an executive session be convened for the purpose of discussion of personnel and contract negotiations. Can I have a motion? Josh?
Second.
Second, that was Erica. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. I'd just like to thank Mayor Clark for and with our budget hearing this evening and to all of you for joining us as well.